Hello, and welcome to Mandatory Redistribution Party. In this episode, I met up with the stripper, sex work activist, and author Stacey Clare. Directly before this interview, I went to see her Edinburgh Fringe show, Ask a Stripper, which was advertised as a candid, saucy secrets from the strip clubs type show, but halfway through revealed itself to be none other than an awareness-raising campaign for workers' rights for strippers. Directly afterwards, we discovered that the place we'd confirmed to record was no longer available, and finding ourselves stuck in central Edinburgh, recording an interview in a takeaway down the road from the venue. As an amateur sound editor, this has presented me with a lot of problems, which, as you'll hear, I've solved with the audio equivalent of duct tape. Please enjoy. So thanks for having me along at the show today.
Thanks for coming. Ask a stripper. Yeah, we literally just invite the audience to ask us anything they want.
And how's that gone? Like, as an experiment in letting people ask you whatever they want, how have you found it?
Fucking brilliant.
Yeah,
it's been amazing. As a performer, I suffer from the problem of getting bored of doing anything twice.
Okay.
As soon as something is repetitive, I get impatient.
Sure.
Or just, I don't like it. And so the beauty of this is that we are, every show is different, like in a subtle way. Because obviously we also still get asked a lot of the same questions.
Yeah, sure.
And we have got some kind of, sort of stock replies and standard gags. And there is quite a lot of things that we have got in the bag of, funnies that we do kind of pull out that we know that are guaranteed to kind of, get the audience on our side kind of thing. I think one of the things about our show is that, not everyone even knows that they're allowed to laugh. I mean, we do this kind of thing, which is on the way in, the show's already started even before the show started, because we come out of the bus and we kind of come and mingle and we're in character and we're like, right, darlings, if you got a ticket in advance, you're in the VIP lounge with me, right? You're my VIPs, and then it's like, we invite them in, and then it's like but my character is like a little bit pissed off.
Right, I did notice that.
She's like, this is the fucking worst strip club I've ever fucking worked in, and we're on a bus, and I can't stand up straight in my heels, and it's hilarious.
A very reasonable complaint, actually.
But I'm very tall, so when I've got my stripper heels on, I'm basically a giant woman.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting use of the space. It feels like an intervention. It feels like a happening more than a show. It's completely non-traditional theatre space. Do you know what I mean? And so I think some people, particularly if they don't get a lot of the Britishness of what we're doing, like my character's from Essex and Morag is from, she's a local stripper. And
I really liked how your double act, it felt a lot like a traditional comedy double act, the way that your two personas work off each other. Yeah, because you're like the straight man and Morag the foil, because she always plays to undercut whatever you're trying to say.
Yeah.
It's really perfect, and I loved like halfway through you kind of drop your personas and you go, actually, here's my real voice. Actually, I have a PhD.
Yeah.
Because we work in strip clubs, we play these public personas, and look how quickly we can sort of drop them and put them on. I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah. I had a conversation with a friend the other day about how, what if you waited until the end to do the striptease? That kind of, taking your clothes off is powerful, and, are you not just giving the game away at the beginning? And actually, no, we kind of consciously decided that in order to just kind of be able to kind of go beyond the objectification and the, we know that from our poster and the kind of curiosity that people have about sex work, that people are going to come with so many kind of loaded kind of connotations and expectations that we're just going to literally fucking get it out of the way, get the clothes off, get it done. And then we spend the rest of the show answering questions, bollock naked, because that's us. We're human beings with bodies. We're not going to, and we don't then become, it's almost like, I feel as if we save the striptease to the end, that it would be like, listen to us, listen to us, listen to us. But then we're going to take your clothes off and give you what you want at the end anyway.
Yeah,
and it might feel like people might kind of come away from that feeling like, they didn't need to do that.
Didn't need to
take their clothes off. And we're like, but we want to almost like reduce the charge around the fact that we do take our clothes off for money. So the way to do that is to just get it in there.
I thought the way you did it was perfect, because you lead with the stripping.
Yeah.
And then after the stripping is done, you're just now just people who have stripped.
Yeah.
So it sort of normalises it straight away, because I think for people who haven't seen it before, myself included, like this was...
Or have you been to burlesque shows?
I have. That's probably the closest thing.
Yeah.
I guess I wouldn't know what the actual line in the sand is between burlesque and stripping. You got...
The line in the sand?
Yeah, well, what's they're different things, right? Well, but in what...
It's money.
Right. And in what sense?
Well, in the sense that burlesque, people go into doing burlesque, they don't go into it to, like, get paid, really.
Right, because it's a cabaret.
It's a very low paid kind of...
You're entering into the normal arts like comedy and poetry where you just don't make money from it.
Yes, there's not a lot of money. I mean, some people can, if they do really, really well, and they dedicate their entire fucking lives to getting handmade costumes and, stitching every single rhinestone on by hand or whatever. And, there are some amazingly talented people in burlesque, don't get me wrong. They are, like Kitty Bang Bang is an actual legend. And you can do all right out of it, but the point is that's not a kind of full-time, I don't think people can rely on that as like a full-time living. Well, most people can't anyway.
Well, what you're saying about burlesque is very similar to the industry I work in, which is comedy, which is trying to work full-time out of that. It's the very top layer of people. Otherwise, you need a day job. You need to support. Yeah. So it just plugs it in with the rest of the arts, which is precarious to the point of you can't really consider it a job unless you're like a decade in and you're at the top of your game. Yeah, sure. So actually, one of the most interesting things I found about the show was the economics of how stripping works. So if you just want to go through that for us.
Of course. The economics of it. Well, what you mean, like, how does a strip club work?
How does a strip club work? How does a stripper get paid? Where does the money go?
In a standard strip joint in the UK now, there's a business model that was born in around about the year 2000. It was when Spearmint Rhino arrived in the UK. That was the first lap dancing club, like officially, first big lap dancing club to arrive in London. They opened up their flagship club on Tottenham Court Road. A guy called Simon Waugh, he basically was exporting a business model from the US that was incredibly popular at the time. Now, the thing is, though, that 20 years ago, around about kind of late 90s, early noughties, was a period of such kind of economic excess and wealth. Like, there was so much money going around. And a lot of it was, particularly in the adult industry, it was bankers' bonuses, corporate entertainment, all that shit that was getting written off as, on the expenses, which all then came out in the wash. And, what a bunch of bastards they were. But there we were to hoover it all up. Right, so, strippers were basically at the heart of, economic sort of excess. And... So the way the strip clubs ran then was that the club would just take a cut of what the dancers earned. So the dancers would pay a house fee and also possibly a commission on what they were selling, like time they sell in VIP. So, which, by the way, VIP room is a place where a stripper takes a client to simply entertainment. Like there's, the licensing won't allow for anything beyond like a bit of a lap dance, and it's just really just
and there's a lot of urban myths
drinking,
about what a VIP
absolutely.
is.
But it's just basically drinking, entertaining. We're entertainers anyway.
And also, we should explain that a house fee is the fee that a stripper pays to the club. It's almost like a marketplace, right? In order to sell what you're selling there, you need to pay the venue.
It is absolutely a marketplace. It's like renting a pitch on a market stall. It's like lots and lots of jobs have that model. Taxi drivers, hairdressers pay to rent their chair in a salon. Lawyers, barristers, they pay rent to rent their chambers. However, in most cases, jobs like that are, you're self-employed. You don't necessarily have your terms of employment dictated to you as an employee. Like you're not treated as an employee if you're paying for your own pitch. Like if you're a market stall holder, where you can sell what you want, you can charge what you want. So
But also they can refuse you the stall next week on whatever grounds they want, right?
Yeah.
Because it's their pitch.
Yeah.
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 So I guess that's the precarity that falls onto...
Yeah, absolutely. The business model is 20 years out of date because nowadays things have changed. I mean, the economic crisis changed everything. Banks have haven't really been regulated, but certainly the culture around this sort of excessive spending has changed. There's a lot less strip clubs now than there used to be. So about 10 years ago, there was about 350 clubs in the country. Now there's about 150. The clubs are now, increasing the house fees and increasing the commissions because they're very much treating us like a stream of revenue. Like the work has then become a source of income for them. And there's a lot more stigma around going to a strip club now. A lot of people are just very wary. They just kind of know, only no good can come of this. And I guess, to be honest, large number of the population, wealth is literally being redistributed. I mean, I heard Bernie Sanders talk about this recently. Something like the top 1% have become 30 trillion richer in the last 10 years. Am I anywhere near the right?
So I found the stat that Stacey was referring to. According to a report by the US Federal Reserve last year, the top 1% in the US economy got their mitts on a total of $30 trillion, having increased their wealth by approximately $21 trillion in the last 2 decades. Additionally, a report by the House of Commons projects that the top 1% wealthiest people will own 2/3 of all global wealth in 1 decade's time. Outside of the Fringe, people are talking about the circuit is shrinking, and lots of people have different reasons why, but one obvious one is going out for a night of comedy is a luxury when you are being squashed further and further. If you have less expendable income, well then luxury and entertainment is one of the first things to go, and I presume that's the same thing that would fall onto a strip club,
100%.
Right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. However, the strip clubs are very much kind of treating the current sort of scenario as just a money grab. It's just a last minute sort of, right, well, let's just try and get as much money as we can out of this because we don't know if our licenses are going to be approved next year. And, they never did anything about the workers' rights 10 years ago when they had the choice, when they had the opportunity, when they passed the Policing and Crime Act. If you have an unregulated working culture or an industry where workers can be exploited, then they will be.
Then they will be, yeah, sure. Yeah. If you want to deregulate a business, you will fast track that to the workers.
The problem with the sex industry, it's never been really properly very well regulated. And this is the interesting. This is where it in our show we talk a lot about the global picture and the actual, how what we're doing in strip clubs links up with a wider global movement for sex workers' rights and decriminalisation. And it was cool because someone in the show this tonight asked about the laws over in the States, which very much don't affect us, but they kind of do because they affect the
global conversation, right? Because if the UK were to try and regulate strip clubs, then that would provoke the ire of people who don't want strip clubs legitimised, because there's many people who want strip clubs to be...
The movement to shut down strip clubs is led by a middle-class feminist agenda, which does not recognise the needs and the realities of what it's like to be a working-class woman in the UK right now. This also came up in another TV debate on Channel 4 recently. There was a live debate about trade union activism in the strip clubs, and it was hosted by Krishna Guru Murphy, and one of my friends went on there. So one of my fellow stripper activists called Penny, she's an amazing fellow comrade, combabe, as we like to call each other, and she's doing a law degree right now. Anyway, so she goes on live TV, and they put her against Eleanor Mills from the Sunday Times. She's the editorial director of the Sunday Times. And she made the classic statement. She said, well, there's plenty of other things that women can do, which I think encapsulates part of maybe the bigger problem of wealth disparity and, people of a certain age and a certain class and
believe that you could just drop one job and just pick another job up.
Absolutely, yeah,
because
absolutely.
they all
believe
have.
in the
If you read
meritocracy.
their Wikipedia, they've just slinked between loads of careers because it's kind of very easy to be in that echelon where loads of jobs, which are basically managerial roles, you can just flink between them as long as you've got contacts and familial connections.
Yeah. So it also happened to me as well in another media conversation I had with Charlotte Mead from the Women's Equality Party.
Right.
Who we were pitched together on another radio debate this time, Radio 4, World at One. Sarah Montague, she actually is on our side. She's pretty cool, Sarah Montague. She supports the strippers. And at the end of the interview, I was a bit annoyed that they were giving the woman from the other side, like obviously they give the woman from the Equality Party the last say. Yeah. Only the last thing she said was, well, when we shut down strip clubs, then men will all just go and do something less sexist.
Oh,
which
wow.
was the perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
I just, apparently, I was just like, bingo. Yeah,
Let's
ideal.
go golfing.
Yeah. It's like just that whole thing, that whole idea that if you just take away the toys, just take away their toys, they'll, go and do something a bit more,
I guess sex work's one of the things that actually gets attacked from some sections of the left, like from the... As it stands, it's fair to say the left, the vague blob that it is divided on the issue of sex work. And as a man, I've tried to come to my own conclusions quietly and privately. The consensus changes about whether I'm a better ally by vocally supporting my branch of feminism that I agree with, or quietly staying out of women's issues and keeping my oars firmly in the boat of men's issues, like reading Men and Motors in the shed, and or tackling skyrocketing suicide rates by teaching the lads down at the warehouse night shift that it's okay to hug. The normalisation of the term sex work is a sign that attitudes are starting to change, but to some sections of the left, this term alone sums up everything they object to. Sex should not be work. Work should not refer to sex. Like a Peter Kay impression, they emphasise this bizarre combination of terms ad nauseum.
Sex work. Sex work. Sex work.
So here's the argument against in a nutshell. A good socialist should not want things to enter the world of capitalism if they can exist peaceably outside of it. We do not want more things to become commodities. There already are things that we shouldn't have as commodities in the first place. Water should not be a commodity, for instance. You need that to survive. Electricity should not be a commodity. Houses should not be a commodity. Staples should not be a commodity. I actually meant like food staples, like rice and bread and carbohydrates, but let's just nationalise stationery as well, I don't mind. And as an extension of that, we shouldn't want sex or women's bodies to become a commodity either. Furthermore, the commodification of sex and or women's bodies only exists to normalise the objectification of women and perpetuate patriarchal misogynistic norms. So what's the counter-argument to that? Well, people who work in the sex industry are working class people trying to earn a living like anyone else. Yes, bread and water shouldn't be commodities, but we don't reserve the same outrage for a baker or a guy at Greggs selling a bottle of Buxton water. Although we are righteously furious at letting agents, but they definitely deserve it. And unlike, for instance, the energy sector where you just can't get electricity if you don't have any money, sex workers aren't trying to monopolise sexuality. In fact, a majority of sex in the UK is free on the point of delivery, and rather than being a state-run service, it is provided by individuals of their own free volition, making it one of the most anarchist recreational activities going. As for objectification, Stacey makes a good argument herself in her Good Morning Britain interview. She considers herself to be less objectified than models or women who work in the entertainment industry, whose images are taken away from themselves, modified, they lose the copyright to them, and they're used for purposes that they don't get to know anything about. Stacey, on the other hand, working as a stripper in a strip club, she is there. She is in control of her own body and how it's represented. She can disengage from customers that she doesn't want to work with. She can make decisions about what she's going to do and how she's going to be represented. And the more that she is not placed in an economically precarious position, the greater that she can make informed choices about what she's comfortable doing without having to be turned into a commodity by the fact that she needs to produce more money. The greater that she can be given rights and job security. the greater degree that she isn't forced to be objectified by the nature of her work. Ultimately, I understand where the anti-sex work people are coming from. Their premises make sense to me as a Marxist feminist, but their conclusions often leave me feeling very cold. It may well be true that a feminist utopia wouldn't have strip clubs, but also it wouldn't have work, it wouldn't have money, it wouldn't have jobs. And it doesn't mean that you can bring about that utopia by penalising the women who work there. Feminism is about equality, but it's also about solidarity with the women who live in the world we live in right now. And stripping them of their jobs with no safety net is no display of solidarity. I was raised Irish Catholic. At times I'm uncomfortable with the idea that sex in any form is legal. But once you get past the fact that this is a job about sex, and just view it as a job, this just becomes a workers' rights struggle like any other.
There is an organisation called Not Buying It. It's run by a lady called Sasha Rakoff. She's a very clever lady, and she worked in hospitals in medicine before she became an activist. And back in 2004, she founded an organisation called Object, and then went on to form the Not Buying It a few years ago. And both of those organisations have been two of the most kind of vociferous, vocal opponents of the strip club industry, particularly the strip club industry. And Sasha Rakoff has got such a bee in her bonnet about male behaviour and about men going into strip clubs that she, earlier this year, hired a couple of men who are ex-policemen turned private investigators, paid them to go and party in a strip club, wearing secret cameras, secretly filming the strippers at work and catching them breaking the law, breaking the rules of the club, which are, we're not supposed to touch customers when we're giving a lap dance. Sure. Well, frankly, no one ever fucking asked us whether we thought touching a guy's knee or rubbing against his groin while we were giving a lap dance, that was never a problem for us. I don't know why this has kind of suddenly entered the kind of wider public lexicon as, well, that's violent. This is violence against women. It mustn't happen. Because, frankly, the shit that goes on behind closed doors. Anyway, that's kind of another conversation. But back to Sasha Rakoff. So she's,
sure, that's like a massive invasion of personal privacy, invasion of workplace and professional privacy.
So
the idea that that's supposed to also involving the police.
So they took the footage. Yeah, they took the footage to Sheffield Council. They take it along to the Sheffield City Council and
is this in the Spearmint Rhino in Sheffield?
Yeah.
Yes,
does it ring any bells now?
Yes,
yeah.
Yes.
So the council see the footage and their hands are tied because, right enough, it says in the licensing legislation that, you're not supposed to touch.
They did break
now,
the law, yeah, sure.
The definition of revenge porn is the sharing of sexually explicit material for the purposes of causing distress. The only two possible outcomes of sharing that material were A, the strippers get sacked, or B, the clubs get shut down, and then everyone gets sacked. So there is no question that would fall under the legal definition of revenge porn. And amazingly enough, thank Christ, the strippers involved, with the help of our trade union, United Voices of the World, are now filing a lawsuit against Not Buying It, because there is something truly insidious about feminists working so hard and clinging to their, sort of ideology so much that they would literally throw us under a bus. Literally. Not literally, not actually.
Yeah, sure.
Not actually throw us under a bus.
I'm going to say that's a huge story. That's breaking. Yeah. Wow.
Stop.
Yeah, you heard it here first.
No, but despicable. It's gross. Mm-hmm. It's gross, and if you can't actually make the sex industry go away, because it will happen behind closed doors, because as it does all the time.
Yeah.
And the only way you can try and make it go away is by criminalising it, which drives it underground, and that's where the real violence and coercion lies. And that's where the real violence and coercion has always laid, because there's always been really poor laws around sex work. It's always been badly regulated. There's always been poor policy that doesn't protect workers. So when we're talking about how, we want the sex industry regulated. Well, that's another conversation. There are big differences between full decriminalisation, partial decriminalisation, otherwise known as the Nordic model, legalisation, and they're the main three. Or just, criminality.
Yeah.
And they all have different wider social impacts. They all have different effects. And there's countries around the world, like New Zealand has full decrim, Norway has the Nordic model.
Yeah.
The UK, sex work is kind of divided into different, so for example, strip clubs are legalised. They're fully legalised because they're licensed.
Yeah.
Whereas other forms of sex work are decriminalised up to a point, but then there's lots of kind of behaviours around full service sex work that are criminalised, like soliciting and brothel keeping and
and the laws about what constitutes a brothel makes it like untenable, right? And that's
exactly. So when we say we want regulation, what we really want is we want to empower workers to stand up against abuses of power in the industry. Like, that's almost like the kind of anarchist sort of solution to a lot of this. It's like, we're not saying that, I suppose the left wing argument is that, it's social responsibility, we must protect the vulnerable women, make sure we keep them as victims, but, we're all...
There's no one to protect if there's no victims, so that...
Right,
sure.
Yeah, exactly. And then, on the other side, the right wing argument is like, well, free market capitalism... do what you want, and as long as the state is getting their cut, as long as the fucking
as long as this involves money,
as long as taxes are being paid, fine.
Sure.
Whereas I think what we're saying is, look, we don't really care what the marketplace is or how it's designed or limited, or it's more like, can workers engage in a process to protect themselves, which is what I think trade union activism is starting to do, which is giving workers a grievance process, giving workers like a clear path through, when shit goes down, here's your backup, here's your support. I think, the left aren't really getting that. The left aren't really seeing that it's what this really is a safety issue.
Yeah. Is there more like, in the anarchist tendency, have you found more solidarity there? Because you're pushing towards collectivisation, that leans way more into the anarchist bent.
Yeah, basically. One of the best collaborations I've done yet is been with a newspaper called Dope, run by Dog Section Press, and it's like an alternative to Big Issue.
Right. Gotcha.
So. Whereas with Big Issue, there's a lot of gatekeeping around who can sell it, and they have to have a license, and they have to have training, and they have to have a fixed address, and there's a lot of actually like, it's not that egalitarian.
Yeah.
Dope magazine is an anarchist newspaper, basically.
Right, sure.
And it's given out for free to people, to homeless people. They come and collect it from Freedom bookshops in Whitechapel, and then they can sell it for as much money as they want. And it's like, it's that kind of direct action of empowering your most vulnerable people to literally, within a matter of days, to access what they need. Same with, I think, the trade union stuff. We're like literally going, okay, look, enough's enough. We can actually do the legal stuff. We can do the legal claims and take the clubs to court and actually, build workers' rights into the system. So very much kind of make that, like, the plea at the end of the show is like, we need to keep these places open. We need our regulated spaces to stay open, because trying to establish workers' rights out in an even more precarious kind of workplace where there isn't actually any regulation at all.
How could you have a union for illegal work? That's just not going to work.
Exactly. Getting United Voices of the World on board, kind of like linking up with the trade unions.
You want to say a bit about who they are?
United Voices of the World are a trade union. They're like sort of lateral, non-hierarchical, grassroots trade union. They're quite new, actually. They're only about 6 years old, but they've already been like smashing the arse out of it with like big wins at places like Topshop and Ministry of Justice and Bank of America. And they support people who are traditionally in the gig economy doing precarious work, A lot of people are cleaners, a lot of people are security workers, a lot of people are working for agencies where they have 0-hour contracts. A lot of people are it's like low wage. I mean, they've basically been supporting our fight now for a year, and we're starting to get somewhere. We're starting to see, strippers are now putting in like claims against their clubs. We've had a few strippers last year won back thousands of pounds in unpaid holiday pay from their club that like fired them unfairly.
And how much of a switch around? Like, is that kind of stuff unheard of? Is this like really... Is this a new degree of gaining ground? Right.
It is pretty damn radical. It is pretty, I think the kind of the potential for the, the wider social impact that this can potentially have is the message that we won't be pushed around anymore. And first of all, we won't be pushed around by the clubs, right? Because if you do, we're going to sue you. Yeah. And secondly, we're not going to be pushed around by feminist campaigners who are going to try to shut down their clubs, because if you do, then we'll sue you. And then the third thing that's happening is we're now gradually starting to have a voice and a say at a policy level. So the public consultations that are happening around the country, there's one happening in Camden at the moment. So Camden City Council are doing a public consultation to, review their policy on strip clubs. And they've invited us to basically, to input on that. So this all sort of began, about 20 years ago. Back in 2002, it kind of started in Camden. Back in 2002, there was a paper published by an organisation called Eve's Housing, which is a women's rights organisation working with vulnerable women. And they did a study called the Lilith Report. And the study claimed that there was a link between lap dancing clubs and increased levels of violence in the area. So they looked at Camden from 1998 to 2002, and they said that they saw, the national average, the rape and sexual assault statistics were higher than the national average. And they linked that to the arrival of Spearmint Rhino, which opened in Camden, right, on Tottenham Court Road. Now, 11 years later, fast forward to 2013, Dr. Brooke Bagnanti, who is the PhD researcher who was behind the Belle de Jour books.
Right, yeah.
So she is a social scientist, right? So she goes back to that report and she drills down into it and she says, well, actually, the methodology, this report doesn't stand up to social science methodology. The sample size was too small. So she actually looked over a 10-year period and she found that there was a drop.
Oh, right.
There was an actual decline in the rape and sexual assault statistics of the area. Yeah. She then pointed out that the population of Camden was also higher than national average. So in fact,
it would have a higher.
It would have had a higher instance, and so that statistic was taken out of context. And then the third flaw was that there were other boroughs of London, like Islington and Lambeth, where there are equally high instances of rape and sexual assault, and no lap dancing clubs.
Right.
So the whole thing.
So just like they cherry picked the data they needed.
Yeah. Absolutely, and and this is endemic in terms of how the sex industry is reported on, is that statistics are cherry-picked to support the narratives and to keep the stigma alive.
Yeah.
It's pretty shocking, because then Eleanor Mills on Channel 4 the other week, when she's talking to my friend Penny, trots out that same report 15 years on.
Right.
And, claims it as fact. And this is kind of what we're up against, is that this is why I told you the story about Sasha Rakoff and how hard she's worked to get that narrative into the public conversation, or into the kind of, what people think about strip clubs is, that's violence against women, that is. And we're like, thanks. Violence against women. And so, so now you want to criminalise it. Now you want to make it illegal, make it go away and make us more precarious. It's, it's kind of exhausting. But what we're doing is, I think, slowly, gradually beginning to raise these very important points, and making people more precarious makes them more vulnerable. I mean, stigma has a clear effect. Stigma creates silence. People don't talk about their work as sex workers. You're 3 times more likely to be misdiagnosed from it with an illness if you're a sex worker, because you are not going to talk about your job in hospital or your doctor. You know, I think that statistics comes from the World Health Organization.
Right.
And so if you've got imagine being a sex worker and not being able to talk about your job to your, accountant, your fucking, I don't know, like parents' evening.
Sure, you just can't get stuff done, right? Because you have to live this strange double life.
Your friends, your family.
Yeah.
I mean, I know some sex workers who are like, they work as teachers.
Yeah.
And so, if that connection is made, that's it. Career over, life over, no future prospects, no, no pension. And so then if you can't talk about it, well, how are you going to access support and resources when you need them? How are you going to find, you don't have a community? And then that makes you vulnerable. And if you're vulnerable, that's when the harm happens. I was saying in the show, perpetrators of violence know who their victims are. They know the profile of the victims. They go after the most vulnerable people who probably don't have a lot of support and don't have a lot of value and sort of social status. So it's not helping. This language. If you go on the Not Buying website, man, it's fucked up. Like the stuff the language they use to talk about strip clubs and women who strip is just as objectifying, if not more objectifying, as being how we get spoken about in the media. What kind of language? Women think it's empowering. Some women's idea of empowerment is just wrapping their implants around the nearest pole. Like what? It's dehumanizing. Yeah, that doesn't sound that doesn't sound like liberatory feminism to me. To attack someone like that. Yeah. So how do you think, with these conversations now being raised, and I guess it's kind of a tumultuous time, right? Because a lot of councils are making decisions on if they want to make restrictions. Yeah, but a lot of strippers are getting together now and painting banners and doing street protests and actually engaging in this. So you think there's a lot of positives coming out of that? Bristol, one of the clubs in Bristol, Urban Tiger, has become the first strip club in the country to recognise the union. So the strippers there now have union recognition, which now means they have bargaining power, which now means they have a clear process. You know what I mean? Right, that's great, yeah. Yeah, and the strippers of Sheffield, well, it looks like they probably will have their club shut down, but they're suing Not Buying It for the revenge porn. Yeah. And, the strippers in Glasgow have all been organising with the GMB to do the Ask the 700 campaign, and they've had their, tables out in the streets and getting people to, the public are on their side. I mean, the public get it. Working class people get it. If you put women out of work, put people out of work, it's more strain. It's more strain on the economy. In the long run. Has to be those kind of. It's like the journalistic class who don't get it because they don't understand the precarity of having to work. Yeah. But anyone else who's like, I'm going to lose my job. Well, it doesn't matter what your job is. You're going to lose your job. And I recently saw that in the press, in the Scotsman. I forget his name, but he's now an ex-policeman, but one of the men who helped design the licensing policy in Scotland around strip clubs he's written a piece, and it's a warning, and he's saying we really be careful. We really need to be careful before we wade in with our, we know best about, we know what's right for you, poor women, and he gets it. Shutting down strip clubs is not good. It's not helping. It doesn't make it go away. It makes it more risky. I feel like every conversation I have about this gets really, really nebulous really quickly. Yeah. And it's almost like about 5 or 6 different conversations need to be had in order to fully wrap your head around it. Because there's so many strands to the whole thing, right? Yeah, it's very intersectional, and it links up with race and class and economics and... I'd like to think the media, mainstream media, could start to unpack some of this in a kind of, in a way that in a gentle way that we've seen movement around the conversation around mental health, for example, conversations around disability. I mean, what you'd want then is just better representation. Yeah. Because, the way sex workers are portrayed in the media generally is a plot device. They're chopped up in a fridge to motivate Yeah.
or just to show that a villain is very bad.
Yeah.
Just a sort of expendable character.
Yeah,
in many ways.
you literally, I mean, hooker jokes.
Yeah.
In fact, last year I was here at the Fringe and I went to Best of Burlesque at the Piccolo tent, and they had an MC, and he was the only male voice in the show, and of course all the performers are female.
Yeah.
And I sort of looked at watching this show, just being like, man, this is so problematic about like the whole format of this thing in the first place. And then he makes a hooker joke, and before he could even get the punchline out, I lost my fucking shit. Right? I heckled him. I yelled at him, "Don't you fucking dare!" Like this, what was it? The joke was, how many prostitutes does it take to change a light bulb? Well, the two that are locked in my basement right now.
Wow,
or something like,
in.
Something along those lines.
Wow.
I flipped my fucking lid and I yelled at him, they're called sex workers and they're fucking heroes. And not only that, but I like kind of made a big fuss. Like after the show, I was like, I want to talk to who's managing, I want to talk to, obviously it's like Assembly that are running the Piccolo tent, right? It's in the Assembly Gardens. And I was like, well, first of all, I want my money back. And secondly, I want you to make sure that he never gets to tell a hooker joke again. And I really went off at them. And I was like, I'm a fucking sex worker. And I, don't appreciate being like referred to as a fucking kidnap victim. Yeah. And it really shook them up. Like it really, they were like, oh shit, yeah, okay.
I'm imagining when you want to be, you can be terrified. I think you've got the aura.
And that was without the shoes.
Like, just before we started recording, you got them to turn the radio off just instantly. Pure intimidation.
That wasn't intimidation, darling. That was just flirting.
That's another form of intimidation to me. Equally scary.
Yeah, well, spent 13 years working in strip clubs. I've got some skills. You know what I mean? I may as well apply them in my daily life.
Like, it should be considered a weapon.
Yeah. So I think I'd quite like to see, for example, the big five, like Assembly and Pleasance. I'd like them to pledge. I'd like a public pledge to, make sure that they get it, to pledge that none of their performers or comedians can use sex workers as a fucking plot device or a joke. Yeah. That's fucked. I mean, I was watching on TV last night a performer, Jay Lafferty.
Oh, yeah.
And she's a Scottish female comedian, stand-up. And she was on Susan Calman's Best of Burlesque or, Fringe Benefits or something, recorded live over at the BBC Harriet,
Yeah.
And she comes on and she talks about, she's saying, the word bosom, Scottish word, bosom. And she goes into this gag about how, Scottish grannies call each other bosoms or they call their granddaughters bosoms. She says, well, I looked up the word bosom. It actually means a woman of low, reputable status. A prostitute, basically, ladies and gentlemen. Right. So grannies are all calling their granddaughters wee hoors. And everyone's, laugh. Yeah. And I'm like, this is 2019.
Yeah.
And you're on fucking BBC 4.
Yeah.
And what the actual fuck? Like, are we, and there, it's women like led thing. Well, it's Susan Calman's the host, and she's a female comedian. I'm just like, just because men are doing it doesn't mean that that's okay. Like,
I think that comedy's a real good weather vane at times for where the national conversation is, and the fact that in comedy, so mental health's picking up a lot. Class recognition's still got a way to go. Obviously, like, the race thing's been like tightened up loads,
yes.
But you can tell which marginalised groups people in general give a shit about by which ones comedians don't feel afraid to talk about.
And objectifying. Can you imagine using a person in a wheelchair as the butt of a joke?
Exactly.
Can you imagine?
But that shows the journey that's yet to go, right? Yeah,
totally.
Because very rarely have I heard someone use the phrase sex worker in a joke, but that's even because. If you were to do it, because the weather vane isn't quite there, people would feel that you're being overly PC.
Yeah.
And they'd be like, oh, here comes the PC. Like, even saying sex worker, it feels like you're virtue signaling, right? So that's showing where the work needs to be done there.
Yeah. Well, I think it is. That's a really great dip test, I want to say.
The dip test is good, yeah, good way of putting it.
For like...
comedy dip test.
The comedy dip test, yeah. Well, I think, hence, maybe this is why... So the show, Ask a Stripper, has been, like, quite successful. As in, it's been the first year that we've done this. And we've been basically selling out every night, and we've, like, got the numbers in, and people are clearly coming because it's like, the words kind of got out that, like, we're the kind of, I don't know, like the voice of, like, the insight. Like we're actually, people are curious enough to come and kind of let themselves be led into this conversation about workers' rights. Yeah. They're allowing it, like we're doing it in a way that it's kind of, well, we came up with this on the way here. We came up with the Trojan horse. Yeah.
I was saying it's such a good, like, it's activism by the back door, because you're just saying, come and ask a hooker whatever you want. But by the midway point, you were very strongly going, this is a show about workers' rights. And that's not explicitly what you came to, but that is where you are right now.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. It was great.
Yeah.
It was such a sneaky move.
It is sneaky, I know. I love it. I'm just like... this is so much easier than trying to, get Sasha Rakoff to talk to me in that room in the council, you know what I mean? Yeah. And then also it's kind of, people are going to sort of, I don't know, just maybe join a few different dots when this comes up again, and they might think differently next time they hear a hooker joke or something, it's like...
But I think that's just how it starts. You just start having conversations and, these things can snowball quite quickly. You just need to... just takes the right few people who have... I mean, a lot of our media and our culture are controlled by a precious few.
Yeah.
You just need to create an ambient culture around where they're finally influenced by it.
Yeah. I know, the bastards.
We'll get there. It'll happen.
Yep.
Cool.
Slowly, one high-heeled step at a time.
Mandatory Redistribution Party was produced and created by Sean Morley and Jack Evans. Our title theme was created by Ella Jean. Stacey Clare is releasing her first book next year. The Ethical Stripper is available for pre-order now on Unbound Books. If you enjoyed this podcast and want to support us, please generate buzz online throughout whatever means you have available. A meme, perhaps. Don't overdo it, though. A modest meme, please. As modest as they come.